Good Wednesday evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Carolinas Weather Group. I am Scotty Powell, along with our regular cast of members. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the Myrtle Beach tornado. It happened back on July the 6th in 2001. I'm sure if you live in the Carolinas or even Virginia or Tennessee, a lot of the news stations and media are down there covering this event, a big event that happened on the Grand Strand. And tonight, we're going to have Mr. Stephen Paff, who is at the time was the lead forecaster for the National Weather Service office in Wilmington, but he is now the warning coordinator or the meteorologist in charge down there. So we're going to be talking to Stephen about his experience with the tornado, and we hope to have Ed Piotrowski on. He is the chief meteorologist at WPDE in the Myrtle Beach area, but we're having issues with his computer, so that's why we're on a bit of a delay trying to get Ed set up. So hopefully we'll have him join us here shortly to talk about his aspect of the storm and what he remembers about it. As always, we are a live broadcast, so if you have any questions you want to send our way, you can do that via Twitter, Facebook. We also have a question and answer tab on this broadcast, so you can submit them that way. Or if you're watching in a few days from now or a few weeks from now and you still have questions, go ahead and send them to us and we'll get them answered and get you an answer back shortly. Also, we have our podcast. You'll be able to download that tomorrow and anytime afterwards. So that's kind of the background or housekeeping of the show. I'm going to turn it over to Ricky because I think I'm having mic issues myself. So, Ricky, I'm going to give it to you, and you can start the interview while I try to figure out what's going on with my computer.
All right. We've all been there before, but we'll go ahead and skip most of the usual introductions because we're a little bit short on time tonight and kind of just dive straight into things. And we got Stephen, and Stephen, I can't remember your last name, so help me out a little bit here real quick.
It's Paff.
Stephen Paff, I'm sorry. So Stephen
okay.
Paff from the National Weather Service joining us tonight. Talk a little bit about the Myrtle Beach tornado, which happened 14 years ago, a couple of days ago now. July 6, 2001 was the date of it. And Stephen, go ahead and kind of set up that morning from a meteorological standpoint. Was it a day that was expected to have a situation with waterspouts and tornadoes?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. And it was an impressive day, an anomalous day for Myrtle Beach, given what had happened in many different extremes. And we think of that event of what ifs, especially what if that 2-mile track tornado tracked more along the high-rise buildings, those sorts of societal issues. What if it was July 4th instead of July 6th, the population that would have been there at the beach who had to evacuate. But meteorologically, we had a pretty interesting configuration with an east to west oriented front that was pushing south across Long Bay in the Grand Strand area, and it made nearly a 90-degree intersection with the sea breeze boundary. That type of setup really led to at least the localized helicity within the area, and the way that the winds were changing with height allowed a supercell to develop and progress southward. So I mean, that's not, for one, it wasn't our typical tornado track that we see in southeast North Carolina or northeast South Carolina. So that was anomalous in a sense. The other thing, too, it wasn't a classic type tropical waterspout that forms and just usually lazily more like tornadic type of situation or so. To further compound the issue, as that line of storms moved through Brunswick County and where our radome is there in Charlotte, lightning hit the radome and knocked our radar offline. So we were basically doing warnings blind in regard to radar imagery, and we were using Charleston's and Columbia's, but the circulation was below the beam at that location. So I mean, it was just very important for us to have excellent partnerships in place with Skywarn observers, the media, Ed and the folks at the other TV stations down there, and the public. So it was really a team effort, as it usually is, but more so external team effort in this case for us to get the message out to the public in a timely way. And so we, I think the tornado touched down about 5 minutes after we got word of it. So for part of it was unwarned, but at least we got the information quick enough to get that warning out, that latter half of the track, to let people know.
So you mentioned the radar went down. Was it a total failure, or was data still received but just not sent back? Were you actually able to go back and look at any of the data during that period?
No, it was a complete data loss. So lightning totally hammered the RDA there. So it was frustrating in a sense. We would like to go back and look and see the evolution of the storm, especially the low-level parameters of that storm, and we just unfortunately won't be able to do so given that data loss.
My question stems from if it was on radar, and this is probably more speculation. Anything? Would it have been more of a tornadic signature, or with a supercell thunderstorm?
Yeah, I think in this case we would have saw probably the mid-level rotation spin down with the classic couplet as intense as that tornado was, waterspout / tornado, and there were a couple other tornadoes reported that day as well. And I mean, you want me to share my screen now and go over some of the pictures of the event?
Sure, if you'd like to. And I think we finally got Ed online.
My goodness.
They see him.
We made it. There must be something with our weather computers, but we have no access to Google Hangouts on those computers, so we commandeered our general manager's office, and we still couldn't get it to work. So Alina Lee, who's on our weather team, told me to do Google Hangouts app, so here we are.
That's happened to me before, too. At UNC Charlotte with firewall settings and at our station as well, so you're not alone. But
I appreciate that, Ricky.
Finally have you join us. So Stephen is in the process of pulling up a few images and pictures from the event, so we'll let him go ahead and throw that up, and then we'll bring you in.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so let's see. I'll do entire screen. And can you see the screen with the Delorme map loading up?
Got it.
Okay, and this was one of the smaller tracks. Again, I didn't do the storm survey, so I don't know all the particulars. But there was one touchdown there just southwest of the 2217 intersection there in Briarcliff Acres area of the Grand Strand. So just a brief touchdown. Most of our tornado touchdowns are less than 2 miles long and less than 10 minutes. But as we get to some of the other ones here, we head farther south, we get by 2nd Avenue Pier to the point near Springmaid Pier. You can see that really long, really photogenic tornado / waterspout that trekked down the beach. And again, like I mentioned earlier, just a lot of the what ifs. Again, what if the storm just tracked a quarter mile or less inland down to high-rise structures, and we had a lot of flying debris. I believe there were a few dozen people that were injured, all with minor injuries from flying debris. But I just can't begin to imagine, what type of damage we could have witnessed if this track was just a touch farther west than what we have here. And you can see a couple other touchdowns along 7317 Bard and south of the airport with that. So when we look at getting back to the overview of what was going on, and I don't know if you can see my mouse moving at all in here, but there is this east-west boundary. You can see Myrtle Beach was 86 degrees, North Myrtle Beach was 77 in the rain, 73 up in Wilmington. So we did this real nice east-west, nearly east-west oriented boundary, and you can see that intersection along the Seabreeze front here. And in this area is where we had that great boundary interaction that led to the generation of the tornado. And some of the pictures that we have, some from Ed Station, some from BTW, but a lot from the public that are out there. And again, I just can't overemphasize that if we didn't have a good Skywarn network in place and the relationships with the media and emergency management, this event could have been much worse given the loss in radar data that day. And you can see how this tornado evolved, getting up to F2 intensity. Some of the closest footage came from Tropical Winds Hotel, Ocean Boulevard, 9th Avenue South, where they were filming. They weren't sure what they were filming at first. I know these are still pictures, but there is a video of this from that WBTW has. And then you can see the progression of the water spout as it moved along, and about the closest point here, the bottom right-hand side, about 250 feet from the camera, where these people were. I mean, I kind of wish when they were taking the video that they did a little bit better job taking shelter, but fortunately the stronger winds were taking all the debris from the beach out into the ocean. And I also think it's interesting to note. Let me switch back to, if I could figure it out here. That stopped my screen. Okay, so can you see me now?
Yep, we got you.
When we think about social media in place the way it is now, I just begin to wonder what that event would have been like if we had Facebook and Twitter and the social connections that we have now. It really would have helped the warning process, I think, even more so than what we had in place. So I mean, it's just really interesting to think if we had something like that again, radar gets hit or some other significant piece of equipment doesn't work right, we can get the word out in many different ways now and leverage on our partners, and likewise they can leverage on us to get information and share like we could never do 10, 15 years ago. I mean, this is 21 years in the weather service for me that I'm coming up on, and when I first started, it took 7 minutes to issue a tornado warning. By the time you get done typing it, reading it, and getting it on weather radio, this is just priceless, crucial time that's lost. And now, from the time that I know I need to get a tornado warning out to the public, it takes about 20 seconds before it goes down to no weather wire. So I mean, the technology, the evolution of what we're seeing is fantastic, and these short few situations is undoubtedly going to save lives. So it's just really unique perspective that we had. It was the first time we had a tornado that large without radar to assist us. So you pull out all the stops to get that warning out, and we did. We just wish we could have captured it forming. Unfortunately, after the lightning took out the radome, it was just something that was nearly impossible to do.
Stephen, I have a question. With the I think I'm having an echo there, but anyway, with the EF2D, where was that located at? I mean, I know that tornado track kind of away from structures a lot of time there, so I'm just kind of curious where that.
Yeah, I think between 2nd Avenue Pier and Springmaid Pier, like 2/3 of the way down the track, that 2-mile track towards Springmaid Piers, I think is where it peaked. And some of it was, I mean, there are some estimates based on how the debris was moving in the video that it might even have been a little bit stronger. But as far as what we could have observed in the damage to some of the buildings there, it was, you have to ignore the tones in the background. But from what we observed in the wreckage that it did impact, it was about an F2 strength, which is usually towards the higher end of what we see in this part of the state.
Yeah, and that was my next question, was what kind of damage. I mean, we would think it would have been stronger had some of that tornado been, more on shore.
Yeah, and I think some of the more significant damage came from the smaller touchdowns south of the airport. So after the one right along the beach kind of dissipated, there was a mobile home park that suffered some damage. There were some high-rise buildings that had some roof damage as well. But again, I mean, I think it could have been horrific if the track was just a little farther west.
All right. So we'll bring Ed in here real quick and talk about the media side of things, because as Stephen mentioned, viewer reports and viewer pictures are so important nowadays. But thinking back to 2001, email was probably about our only thing we were really getting pictures on.
Yeah, you're right about that. And can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah, we got you.
Okay, no problem. You're right. Back in 2001, we had gotten quite a few phone calls into the weather office about a potential tornado. And of course, a lot of times you're skeptical of that because we hear those all the time and they end up being just downburst winds. But in this particular case, my weather office was located right there at the Myrtle Beach Pavilion, which was between 8th and 9th Avenue North. And we had one of the great shots where we had palm trees behind us in the ocean, so I was able to go on the back deck on our 2nd floor of our office and look to the north and actually saw the tornado at the time, waterspout tornado, come ashore and then eventually move right over our actual weather office. And I did exactly what I tell kids to do all the time, and I took cover in the bathroom while the window was being sandblasted by the tornado sucking all that sand in off the ocean. So it really developed, as Steve said, just to the south of us. When I went back on the back porch after it had gone by, it was this magnificent funnel. I had no camera with me. Back in that day, I don't even know if I had a phone that had a camera. So I could not take any of the pictures. But we did have a lot of people take video and a lot of phone calls that really tipped us off that we had something big going on before I actually saw it.
And so from a covering standpoint, it was more of a take shelter standpoint instead of getting it on air, really, because it was so close.
Absolutely. We had one tower camera at the time, and it happened to be a camera right in the top of our weather office, which we were able to pan, tilt, and zoom. It's the only one we had, and we were able to see the tornado form just a block south of us. And it's in a lot of the videos that you'll see on YouTube. It was incredible to see this tremendous funnel coming out of the sky and barely moving down the beach. And that's pretty much what we used the entire time we were on the air until it eventually disappeared in the heavy rain down to the south of us near Spring Bay Pier.
So did you end up seeing the tornado actually before the warning was issued? I assume the viewer reports were probably your first heads up before the Weather Service got the reports secondhand almost.
Yeah, as Steve said, it was unfortunate. I think Columbia's radar was down for maintenance, and then, of course, the LTX was hit by lightning from the same storm, I believe, as it was heading southward, if I'm not mistaken. And so we had gotten those phone calls. I looked outside and said a few nasty words and said, I can't believe I'm looking at a tornado coming toward my weather office. How many weather people get to experience that? So I immediately got on the phone with my news director and say, hey, we have to get on the air. There's a tornado. And quite honestly, I know the Weather Service did. Can you guys still see me? Am I still there?
We got you.
Okay.
Sometimes
Sorry
it goes
about
in and
that.
out a little bit based off latency. That's okay.
Anyway, I don't remember exactly when the Weather Service issued the warning. I know that I had seen it, so we were on the air with that at that point in time. That was the first time I'd ever experienced a tornado going over anything close to me. So.
A quick question, and hey Ed, finally glad to get you back on here. This
Thank
is
you.
Scotty. Stephen, my question for you is, with the radar being out, how much were you guys relying on Ed's coverage and the other television stations to kind of keep up with what's going on in the area?
Yeah, and that's a good point. I wish we had our TV partners' feeds from Myrtle Beach in Wilmington. We don't. But at least with stuff online now, between Facebook and Twitter, and we have a social media dashboard where we can follow everything Ed and our partners down there are receiving. So it's just another way in an area we otherwise wouldn't know. But there was definitely phone coordination going on between emergency management, between our media partners that day. And I just looked, Ed, we issued the warning at 4:34, and I think we got our initial reports around like 4:20, 4:25.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how long it's going on before then. Probably good 10 minutes, I would think, 10, 15 minutes before we actually got word and were able to act on it.
And it was the very first thing I had heard was from Restaurant Row, an area that's very populated with people, especially that time of the year, that there had been some poles snapped up near Chestnut Hill, I believe. And not that we discounted it as not being a tornado, but more than likely we thought it was straight line wind damage. And then when we actually saw the tornado, that's when we knew it was the real deal. And I'm sure it's been discussed. It's incredibly lucky that nobody was killed or seriously injured, given that that week around the 4th of July is by far the busiest week of the entire summer along the Grand Strand, with more than 500,000 people here.
And Stephen, I was interested in the track of the tornadoes, because you showed that image with all of them plotted, and it's interesting how the one went almost southwest and a few of the weaker ones turned more towards the northwest in their track. Is there a reasoning for that?
Yeah, I think there might have been just a westward propagation of the convective development along that front as it developed. Not pure back building, but just the slow southward push of the front and tapping into a lot better instability along the sea breeze axis. Because the sea breeze was moving westward as that front was moving south, so you're going to get some southwestward displacement in the convective development, and I think that's what led to it. But it is a very good observation, because most of our principal tornado tracks are southwest to northeast to northwest to southeast. It's very, very rare to get a north to south. And another rare tornado that I remember doing a north to south track was in Gerald, Texas. I don't know the synoptic situation for that. I know it was a boundary pushing south, but I don't know about convective outflow interactions or whatnot. But these oddball tornadoes do occur, but it's just really weird to see one in northeast South Carolina.
And going off of that, I believe Daniel has a question.
Yeah, Ed and Stephen, thanks for coming on tonight. Talk a little bit about the Grand Strand and how often or how rare it is to get tornadoes, especially significant tornadoes, and how much does the sea breeze play a role into that?
Steve?
All right, how about I talk about the sea breeze, Ed, and you can talk about the climo aspect of it.
Okay.
Okay, and it's a very good observation with the sea breeze, because it's a stabilizing feature. But that day on January 6, 2001, it really hadn't progressed that far inland, so it was encountering some other larger scale circulations that were kind of pinning it to the coast a little bit. For that late in the day to have it that close to the coast, usually by 4 p.m. that thing's already into Marion County, if not farther. But it does stabilize, so it prevents a lot of significant tornado development. But in that case, it was the main reason why a tornado did occur. But what we typically see on your summer day is, that sea breeze front's forming late morning, and it's already pushing inland early afternoon and well inland by 4 p.m.
Yeah, Steve's right on the money. It is incredibly rare for the Grand Strand to have a tornado, period, especially one of that strength. You'll find most of the tornadoes, and they're rare even across the entire county, are typically from Conway westward, just inland, because the sea breeze, as Steve mentioned, is traveling pretty far inland at that point in time. So, and again, that sea breeze is such a stabilizing factor in the afternoon. We see thunderstorm complexes completely fall apart as they're approaching the Grand Strand, often because of that stabilizing effect. And just a rare situation to see such a big tornado in Myrtle Beach. And I've been here 21 years now. That's by far the biggest tornado I've seen actually go through any part of our viewing area. The Darlington tornado from several years ago, I believe, was a pretty significant one as well. But compared to 1984, it doesn't compare to that, when we had the big ones out near Bennettsville and Red Springs. But still, an F2 tornado that may have been an F3 based on some of the information we've heard here tonight and from other sources, pretty incredible to be that close to the coast.
I have a question, Ed, with the way that stations do things differently. What was your protocol there at the station? Did you guys stay on air during the tornado warning, or did you just do updates every few minutes, or how did that go about? How was the on-air coverage during that day?
Our policy is if we have a tornado warning, we stay on the air until the warning has either been canceled or, of course, we get to a point where we don't think there's no longer a threat. In this particular case, because we actually had a live shot from our tower cam of the tornado, we stayed on constantly until the threat was no more, when the tornado had actually lifted out by the Air Force Base. So it was continuous coverage, and that tower camera shot stayed up for as long as we could have it up, and it was basically just warning people down the beach to take cover immediately. And Steve can probably back me on this. We were very lucky that this tornado was moving so slowly, because it could have caused a lot of damage and killed a lot of people if it was moving a lot faster than what it was.
Yeah, especially some of the video you see of people that were on the beach as this thing was moving south. They had ample time to get out of the way. You see them moving on. So, I mean, that's a very good point as well. If that was moving at 40 miles an hour, people likely would have been caught off guard.
I believe Kit has a question for either of you two.
Yeah, so like Ricky sort of touched on it earlier, but I've seen a couple videos of the tornado where it doesn't move from the shoreline, but like a matter of yards. So I was wondering if it was just something about that, like just the land itself affecting the tornado, if that had a factor on the fact that it tracked only on the shoreline, and if in a similar situation it wouldn't shift left or west into those high-rise buildings.
Yeah, it's a good question. I always wonder what the role of the high-rise buildings was on its steering, given the weak steering environment as it headed south down the beach. But I also wonder too, with the winds coming off the ocean with less friction versus the higher friction, with the high-rise. I'm not really sure. I don't know, Ed. Do you have any comments on that?
I wish I did, but I don't. I agree with you. A lot less friction with that air coming in off the ocean. But I don't know that would have pulled it one way or another or kept it on track, to be honest with you.
So how about different types of weather from this? Was it purely a tornado storm? Was there hail from it, downburst winds? Any other types of severe weather threats associated with it?
I know we had hail, but most of the wind damage that I saw was directly related to the tornado, and Steve might be able to.
Yeah, no, I think the wind damage was tornadic, and there was the few spots of hail. But you remember what size the hail was? I can't remember.
I want to say pea size to maybe quarter size at the max, but it was fairly small by severe standards.
Yeah, and I don't think it did much damage south of Springmaid. I know it seemed like the lightning activity dropped off with it as well, which, as you know, when you see a lot of the increase in lightning activity, that might be a precursor to tornadic development with some of these storms, and then once it drops off too, it usually coincides with its demise. Updraft is weakened.
It'll be nice when we get that 1 minute satellite scans too. We can see the storms growing. I think Chris has a question. Although Scotty tells him to go. Oh, I thought he said go home, but he says you up. All right, let's go.
Well, guys, I was just starting to think about whether or not there's been a drastic population change or tourism change in the last 14 years or so, and how you guys maybe tailor your forecast information on any given day towards that change. And also, I know we've also talked about with the invention and innovation of social media, how things may be different if that scenario comes about again.
Well, let me answer the back end of that question. In terms of me going out and having to do a storm survey assessment, the storm damage team goes out and looks and how strong was the tornado, what was the path length, what was the path width, that sort of thing. With all the cameras that are out there, I think it would make my job so much easier seeing all this information, just like the August 2011 water spout. It was the easiest tornado survey I ever did after that thing moved on shore because everything was documented. And if that happened today during the daytime like that one had done, I think we'd have a real easy time determining multiple aspects of it. But getting to the first part of the question with the population shift, I know Horry County has just had explosive growth, and I know, Ed, where your office is at, sometimes it's even difficult getting from the station, from the studio to the beach on 501. So there's a proverbial logjam that goes on there, given the population growth, and I think that just makes getting the public informed and ready to handle something like this again that much more difficult.
Yeah, the population has exploded in Horry County by a couple 100,000 just from the beginning of 2000. It made it one of the fastest growing counties in the entire country. But unfortunately, the roads have not kept up with that, and that's, you know, a hangout for another night when we talk about evacuation for hurricanes around here. But yeah, in terms of what we do now, we have a lot more cameras on the beach, not just because of the tornadoes, but because of what we do on a daily basis. But we have at least 4 along the Grand Strand. We're adding 2 more that we stream online now so that folks can see that. And social media is a huge player in ground truth. There's no question about that. I can only imagine, as Steve has said, if we had social media back in 2001, we'd probably have 10,000 pictures of that tornado with the amount of people that are along the Grand Strand, because we had probably 15 or 20 different videos from folks back in the day. So, you know, we continue to tailor our forecast to the Grand Strand. We have a Grand Strand forecast and an inland forecast, and people always ask where that dividing line is. We typically will use Carolina Forest because Seabreeze at least gets there and perhaps all the way to Conway a lot of times. So.
And we would have had those videos in HD.
Right.
I kind of have a follow-up with what Chris was talking about. What was the public's perception of this event, and how do you think the hotel owners, the restaurant owners, the business owners now in the Grand Strand, do you think they're prepared for another event like this during the peak time? I know you deal with hurricanes down there, but with tornadoes, those are more kind of just spin up. We don't really know when or where they're going to hit. Do you think the public's prepared for that if that was to happen today? And do you think a lot of the hotel owners and businesses along the Grand Strand would be ready for that?
You know, that's a great question, and quite honestly, I think because this was such a fluke to so many people, I don't really think that most people, business owners, hotel owners, or what have you, change their plan at all. I think over the course of time, just education from whatever Steve does, whatever I do, when it comes to hurricanes and tornadoes, they've learned over time what they should be doing to help protect themselves from the rare case of a tornado or a hurricane. But I don't know that that one event changed the minds of many people simply because it was such a fluke. And as I mentioned before, not just South Carolina, North Carolina residents here, but really people from all over the country were here, some that have been in tornado markets, others that are not. So, you know, you're on vacation. Whoever expects to see a tornado? So I think it was pretty amazing for everybody.
Ed, I'm curious. Sorry, Scotty, I didn't mean to interrupt.
That's
you.
okay. I just one little follow up. I lived in the Myrtle Beach area for 2 years, and I can't remember, but there was a few hotels that were actually hit by a lot of the debris.
Right.
I know it was near the Family Kingdom, but I'm not sure of the hotel names. But I do know it kind of did some damage in that area.
Yeah, the Bar Harbor was hit particularly hard. It stripped a lot of the stuff on the front of the hotels off, did some significant structural damage. In fact, they had to close down for the rest of the season to repair all that. That was by far the hardest hit hotel when the tornado actually did move ashore to the point where it was far enough inland, Ocean Boulevard, to cause significant damage to the hotel.
So, from a warning standpoint, Ed, is there anything on Myrtle Beach that can be used? They likely don't have outdoor sirens or anything, do they? Is there police cars that can be used or anything, or is it kind of just, I hope you hear about it before it hits?
Well, that and technology these days is to the point where everybody's got a cell phone. Most people are pretty savvy and will actually have their phone set up so that with GPS they're able to get the warnings. So I think that in and of itself is going to help tremendously. But I'm a big James Mann fan, and I'm not a fan of the tornado sirens at all. We used to have them in Marlborough County after the big tornadoes in 1984, and I think that they have since then let those kind of expire, given the fact that they really don't alert enough people. That your technology, television, what Steve and them do is really what matters the most.
All right, and Kit has a question for you, and then I'd like for you guys kind of to go into a few stories. I'm sure you've got some stories and memories from the day, and our viewers usually seem to really love those, so we'll tell a few of those afterwards. But Kit, go ahead.
So Ed, you sort of started touching on this, and got it in my head. So you were talking about how some of the hotels got a little bit of damage from the debris, but as far as the other smaller structures that are built to be protected against hurricane damage, how much does that protect against tornadic damage? Because they are very different in the winds.
They are, and I mean, you think of an F2 tornado, if the winds were estimated 150 miles per hour, that's close to Category 5 strength when it comes to a hurricane. So that alone can cause significant damage. Outside of that particular hotel, we had some trolley cars that were turned over, cars that were significantly damaged. Same with some homes where things were ripped off the side. But, the hotels, for the most part, are anchored, obviously, very well into the ground, and they're built high enough to let water go underneath them. But at the same time, superficial damage is a big deal with any kind of flying debris, anything that happens to come off of the hotel. And I don't know if Steve might be able to add on to that, what he's learned over that time.
Yeah, and there's limited help in a heavily fortified hurricane zone. You need to think of hurricane clips and the trusses and things like that are done the way that the code is. It offers some resiliency, but like you said, Ed, I mean, you get 150 mile per hour winds. You might have all the hurricane clips in the world, and your house is still going to have issues. But I think overall, as far as the counties being storm ready and having a great plan in place to handle disasters of a hurricane nature also helps with preparation for tornado type situations, and we saw that in Pender County with the Rocky Point tornado several years ago. I mean, they know how to fully execute the ICS, the Incident Command System, and EOCs and Incident Command Posts, and the exercises we've done on many different weather events over the years. I mean, all of that, I know they're different impacts, but yet they can yield similar results, and that's why I think that continually to have these partnerships where Ed and I can go do outreach and share our experiences with the public, or work on exercises with the Horry County Emergency Management on a hurricane or some sort of other natural disaster. I mean, that's a lot of planning resiliency that's in place when we're fortunate that we have that in place, and I don't think we would have that in place were it not for the hurricane threat. So it does afford some planning preparedness as well. So I think that all comes together to help out.
Speaking from planning, excuse me, how are the emergency managers receptive after it? Was there communication between the Weather Service and media and them, and is there maybe a better relationship now after an event like this?
Well, I think events like that always pull that partnership, make it stronger. and even with the community, and touching back on the one question earlier, I mean, I do think you see a response in the community, but it's short-lived. So many people come and go. That's why I think outreach and awareness has got to be perpetual. It's like a living document with us having to deal with the hordes of people that are moving into the area every year. But as far as that partnership with emergency management, I certainly think it makes it stronger. We get to look and see what worked well, what didn't. Of course, the radar being down from lightning doesn't help at all. But there are other procedures that we can go through, hot wash and briefings, and we have integrated warning team partnership meetings to tornadoes and a whole host of other things. So I would agree that it does help. It's a silver lining, basically.
And so, Ed, you mentioned your story earlier. What other stories do you have today?
We had, it was just a crazy day. I mean, I remember getting in and seeing the thunderstorms heading south, and then seeing, of course, the radar go out and basically flying blind at that point in time. And then we started, as I mentioned, getting the phone calls, and I knew it was coming from the north, so I decided to walk out on our back deck, and just shocked me to see a tornado. Again, how many meteorologists actually see a real life tornado go over their weather center, which it did, and it was sandblasting the windows. It had moved just to the south of us. I noticed the wind had relaxed, and that's when I was able to go outside and actually see the bigger funnel form about a block south of us. And it was the same story from a lot of folks. They were just in shock that they saw a tornado in the city of Myrtle Beach, their vacation destination. They're enjoying the Pavilion amusement park, the beach, and then here comes a tornado in from the north. You hear some of the video. There's some colorful language. There's people that are in shock. The one piece of video Steve was talking about where they were looking out of their, if you see the YouTube video, they were looking out of their room, and you see the monster-looking tornado go right in front of them, and the gentleman keeps taking the video. His wife keeps telling him to stop taking the video, to take cover, and then she proceeds to call him several expletives because he's a dumb you-know-what for continuing to take the video. But they were lucky that the winds were parallel to the window at that time and not directly into them. But those stories were repeated. I posted something on my Facebook page asking people what their memories were just the other day. And boy, they're very passionate about what they saw, because I think they all know that, man, that was a tornado. And if I wasn't in the right place at the right time, I could have been a victim of that tornado. So, and they're rare, so people just don't see them here. So when they do, it's something they'll never forget. And same here, I'll never forget it.
I mean, everyone wants their house to be struck by a tornado when they get damaged. They want it to be that tornado instead of the wind. So,
right.
I can see why that something they can actually, if they survive, kind of proud of seeing to a certain extent. But
yeah, I just wish I had a camera with me at the time, which is probably the dumbest thing to say. But man, that would have been a memory.
Yeah, that's what every news person, I guess, ends up saying.
Right.
Well, what day of the week was this? Because I guess I never figured that one out.
Gosh, was it a Tuesday or Monday or Tuesday, Steve?
No, boys, it was a Friday evening.
It was a Friday. Boy,
See, all the neighboring TV markets, like up here, I get the Charlotte and the Greenville, Spartanburg, Asheville TV markets. They were breaking the news about what's going on because, of course, everybody from our part of the Carolinas are coming to your place on the weekend.
Right.
And it was a big deal.
That's
I remember
right.
it was on
a
a Friday night.
I remember all the Charlotte stations were doing. I mean, I think they had people down there at almost 6:30. I mean, they flew, and it was on through the night. And I'm sure the Asheville and Greenville stations as well.
Right. I remember, Eric Thomas in Charlotte, Steve Udelson in Charlotte, and Laney Pope, who was in Charlotte at the time, had all called because I have known them for a while, asking about what's going on. You guys have video that we can have, and so on and so forth. So. Yeah, the Charlotte stations and the Weather Channel were incredibly interested in what was going on in Myrtle Beach, knowing the tourist destination that it is.
Hey, Ed, just curious.
Oh, go ahead, Scotty.
I was just curious. Were you the only med on duty that day, or did you have anybody in the office with you?
No, I was the only one on duty. Our staff has expanded now to 4, but at the time we had 2 meteorologists and a non-meteorologist, and I was the only one in the evening. And at that point in time, I think we only did a 6 and 11 o'clock newscast. So the shift wasn't nearly as demanding as it is today with all the shows and webcasts and radio and so on and so forth. So I got to the office probably about 2 o'clock, and then, as they say, all hell broke loose over the next couple of hours.
So once your news director got a hold of the video, what was the reaction from the news department and management and everyone? Were they in shock or?
Oh yeah. See, remember my office at the time was right on the beach in Myrtle Beach. the main news station was actually in Florence still at the time, 70 miles away. So they were able to log in and actually see the tornado on the tower cam, and they all were shocked. Our anchors were shocked. The news director, she says, "What do you mean there's a tornado?" I said, "There's a tornado on the ground. Look at the tower camera." She paused for a few seconds, and then all I heard was, "Oh my God." And next thing you know, we were on the air with it. So pretty amazing.
I got a quick question for that. How was the communication back and forth with you guys being about 70 miles away? I mean, did you run into any complications, or was it pretty smooth?
You know, shockingly, we lost our computers for a while when the tornado went over the weather center. But what we happened to have were telephones, and we still had our tower cam. For whatever reason, we were able to get on with that and a telephone with really no problems whatsoever. Then eventually we were able to pop up again on the chroma key once everything came back up. But yeah, back in the day, even 2001, we were communicating by phone or IFB, which is the earpiece, of course, that we can hear our producers through. So it was a bit of a challenge, but just as long as we were able to get on the air and we had a hot mic and a tower camera, we were able to stay on and do whatever we had to do.
And Stephen, how about weather service people coming in now, or who were there during the time of the event? I know you mentioned you guys have used that tornado as a training aid in the recent years. What was the weather service reaction like? And I think you're still muted, Stephen. You're going to have to unmute yourself at the top.
Okay, there we go. Okay, yeah, I know I think there was a slight risk for severe weather that day, so when we had a few extra people on hand, and then it all broke loose for us when the radar went down, knowing you had this healthy-looking line of storms pushing southward. So that once we got word that there was a possible tornado, and then of course the confirmation and the tornado warning out, we had several more people come in early, and I know our day shift had to stay later. Or at least we're fortunate to have a half dozen people here. I can imagine what it must have been like for Ed, trying to scramble up with it right on your back door like that, for safety first, for one, and then obviously getting the word out to the public to keep them safe.
Yeah, and once a tornado had actually passed by and dissipated, then it becomes a news story. There, we sent obviously quite a few crews down there to cover every aspect of it, and I was basically there to just talk about how it actually transpired that day. But it really became a news story after it had dissipated, and that's where we realized the extent of the damage and how lucky we were that there weren't any significant injuries that day.
And so going back on this tornado, it's been 14 years now. I mean, obviously people still have memories, but do you think it's still maybe the most prolific event in Myrtle Beach weather history?
Yeah, I definitely think so. Go ahead, Ed.
Well, I agree with Steve. I think there's no question about that. Perhaps second would be Hurricane Floyd in 1999, when we had 20 inches of rain in Horry County, and at one point Floyd was nearly a Category 5 in the Bahamas, so people really freaked out about that storm. But in terms of something happening right here in Myrtle Beach, I think there's no question that's the one event everybody will always remember.
Yeah, just like if you go out to Bennettsville and McCall, the '84 is their big memory, and everybody I talk to when I do outreach in Myrtle Beach, it's always the 2001 tornado there.
In fact, there are some hotels and a couple of the piers that when you visit their hotel or their pier, they don't hand out a postcard of the beach. They hand out a postcard of the actual tornado in 2001. So they remember it.
I lost my train of thought here for a second, but
I was just going to say, I guess memories are shorter, because Hurricane Hazel in 54 I thought would have been the story.
There was just such a small population along the Grand Strand back in 1954 that there are some people that remember that, but it was, 60 years ago now. So many of the people that remember that were very, very young, and there's just been a huge influx of population over the past 60 years. That probably 98% of the people, if not 99%, have no idea what Hazel's about unless we tell them about it.
I just remember hearing stories that the storm surge was almost to the stoplights on Ocean Boulevard and stuff like that. So,
and Steve might be able to confirm this, but I'm pretty sure the statistics I saw show that 85 to 90% of all oceanfront property from Little River to Pawleys Island was destroyed by Hurricane Hazel. So if the same hazel were to come ashore today, it would be a lot worse than Hurricane Hugo was.
Yeah, how are your dunes doing there in the Grand Strand?
They need help.
So my curious question is, from a management standpoint now, do you think it would be a better event if it happened now, or a easier to cover event, or maybe a harder to cover event because of the population influx?
Well, I think at least from a tower cam perspective, the ability to communicate to people via their cell phone, through the webcast, through our on-air broadcast signal, it'd be a lot easier to do it that way. I'm sure Steve can add on to this, but you still run into the challenges of people actually taking cover unless they see something. They often are skeptical about any kind of a tornado warning, and I understand that because most people don't get hit by one when there is a warning. But yeah, I think from our perspective, it's a lot easier to cover now with more cameras and more abilities to communicate at a faster pace.
Yeah, and the wireless emergency alerts too, getting, like you mentioned, Ed, with the cell phones. I know a lot of people are still kind of trying to understand how to get information after that, but between the different apps that I know a lot of the TV stations have, just the Weather Service doesn't have any apps, but at least we can talk via Twitter and on Facebook, even though it chronologically is hard to do nowadays. But I think a great point to bring up is the apps that the American Red Cross has, and also TV stations like yours, where you people can get that information basically at their fingertips better than they could back in 2001.
Yeah, that's the big deal. It may not have changed a thing in terms of reducing the number of injuries that occurred, but no deaths is what you aim for, and that's what happened. So we were very fortunate.
I'm quite curious. Did you hear anything from the lifeguards? Did anybody talk to them? What they were thinking as it's a normal day on the beach. They're monitoring people swimming and stuff, and then all of a sudden a tornado comes through. Anyone or anybody get any conversation with those guys?
Yeah, because our weather office was right there at the pavilion, we had the opportunity to, especially after the event, talk to some of the lifeguards, and they were as in shock as anybody. They're looking to the north here and seeing a real-life tornado coming down the beach, and their first reaction was to get people out of the water, which they did. Surfers were the hardest to pull out for obvious reasons, but they did a great job between them and law enforcement going up and down the beach because it was such a slow-moving tornado. Everybody had time to take some sort of cover so they weren't in the path of this thing. So yeah, they did a good job that day.
When you go through lifeguard training, I don't think tornado safety is one of the things you talk about, sir.
No, you're right about that.
We do now in the Grand Strand because of 2001.
Oh, do you really?
Awesome.
Yeah, we have one of our, I don't know if you're in feedback or not, but we have one of our forecasters going to be doing some training with Surfside Beach lifeguards. We train a lot with Duke Brown, who's pretty much an historic lifeguard.
Yeah,
that's
he
been
is.
around forever, works for Horry County. He's also a teacher with junior guard. So, I mean, any chance we get between rip currents, tornadoes / water spouts, lightning safety as well, we do so.
Ed, how many mobile homes are down in that area nowadays? I know that sometimes the beach areas are pretty popular for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's not so much mobile homes right along the immediate coast. It's more the RVs. We have 3 major campgrounds here, and they're pretty much populated year-round. And even when they're not populated, I have a lot of people down at the campgrounds. They store those RVs very close to the beach, huge storage facilities for those. So that's a big problem because a lot of times those are visitors and may not be tuning into us per se, and we do have to rely on them getting their information via their telephone or their cell phone or a computer more so than television itself. But I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Steve.
Yeah, I had to unmute myself. I was afraid I was getting some feedback issues, but yeah, I mean there is a lot of the infrastructure that's at risk, and unfortunately the only thing we do is just hope it doesn't impact that infrastructure. And the other thing to think about with this tornado is what would the result have been? We talked about if it was a little farther west, but what result would it have been if it happened at 10 at night versus the daytime when people can see it and take action. Get out there and take a look and then take action based on that, because like Ed mentioned, that unfortunately that's what people do. They need something to hang their hat on with respect to what action they're going to take, and it's a difficult challenge. People out in Tulsa, Oklahoma, it's a different story compared to here, just depending on the level of situational awareness that they have. And like Ed mentioned earlier, climatologically, we don't get that many tornadoes. So, is it really right for us to assume that the public is going to have the same amount of preparation and situational awareness as an area like Oklahoma or Texas? And unfortunately, the answer is no. Do we need to be? Yes, but that's what Weather Ready Nation is to try to get everybody galvanized in the same direction with respect to weather hazards. Because when you go to someone's house who's been destroyed, one of the first things they say is, "I can't believe this happened to me." It might be another 20 years before Grand Strand sees another tornado like that, but it's going to happen at some point, and it's up for all of us to work together and make sure that people are as prepared as they can be.
And the thing about it being the Myrtle Beach area is that it's a tourist city, so like you're going to have people who have never even seen a large thunderstorm like that come through, let alone a tornado.
You're absolutely right. You get basically two segments of the population, one that has never seen anything like that and has no idea what to expect, and then you have people that it may have been in a market where they have bigger tornadoes, like, oh, it's Myrtle Beach, it never happens here, or they're not going to be that bad. But whether it's an F0 or an F5, they're capable of killing. Obviously an F5 much more so, but still, tornado's a tornado any way you look at it.
Well, that's about all I've got. So Scotty, Daniel, Kit, Joey, have you got anything else to add?
I think Joey does. I interrupted him just a minute ago, so I apologize for that. Go ahead, Joey.
I have no idea what I was going to say a minute ago. it's long gone at this point.
I apologize. I didn't mean to cut in. Daniel, do you have anything?
No, not really. Just first off, thanks for Ed for coming on. I know we've tried to get you on in the past, and I'm glad that you finally were on. Of course, Steve, you've been on with us before. The Myrtle Beach tornado really is interesting, not only for the folks that live in your market, but for folks all across the Carolinas, all across Southeast, who come and visit your area once a year. It was a big event. Like I said earlier, even the media up here, they were making a big deal out of it because we love your area, and and it also kind of sent the message that you had some problems, you had some damage, but don't let it ruin your vacation. Be ready and head on down. So.
How important was that? How important was that, Ed, to kind of, on a touristy side of the things, you have the city manager and mayor pushing, hey, everything's good here, come down and visit us. I mean, it was a Friday afternoon, so I'm sure people were coming in for the weekend. I mean, did you guys have to do some self-promoting like that?
Yeah, and we did it knowing, of course, that things were going to be okay. We would never, when I say us, the city of Myrtle Beach, they made sure that this was going to be a safe place. There were certain areas of the beach which you were not allowed to go to, obviously down near the Bar Harbor for that reason because of the damage that was done. But 99% of the Grand Strand was fine after that, so they were encouraging people to still come on down because it is the single biggest thing we do is tourism down here along the Grand Strand. Along those lines, Bertha in 96 came ashore July 12th, and that was one of the very busy weeks in Myrtle Beach as well. But because everybody had evacuated, that weekend in Myrtle Beach was as quiet as a January weekend. So a lot of people lost money because the word just didn't get out there fast enough that everything was fine in Myrtle Beach after that hurricane.
Very, very interesting. Well, I'm going to turn it over to Kit and Joey. They have a couple of questions, and we'll kind of end up this part of the program.
Well, mine is sort of obligatory given recent events up around the North Carolina coast with all of the recent shark attacks there have been. And currently on the Discovery Channel this week, it is Shark Week. So my question is, what is the plausibility of an actual Sharknado?
Steve, you're the expert.
Well, we haven't done the policy on Sharknado warnings yet, so it might take a year or two, government speak.
Hey, there was a shark that fell out of the sky in Virginia Beach the other day. I don't know what caused it. Probably got picked up by a bird, osprey, or some little baby nurse shark and then dropped. That happens a lot along the coast, as Ed probably knows. But
Right.
Interesting, especially when there are thunderstorms in the area.
Sharks
Exactly.
falling at a rate of 2 inches an hour.
Yeah. Sharknado Carolina's version. I hear you.
Shark-sized hail.
That would be a first.
There actually has been a lot of documented cases of fish falling out of the sky after water spouts and things. But I'll just throw out my final question. I always ask all of our guests every time they're on. We have a lot of students and teachers that watch our program. So one thing I always ask all of our guests, if you give one piece of advice to, say, a teacher who's trying to help a student help a student who's interested in meteorology advance into that career, or to a student who's watching, what's the one piece of advice you could give them? And I'll let both of you go. Ed, if you want to go first.
Okay. For me, I was lucky enough when I started out at WCTI TV in Newbern, North Carolina, eastern part of the state. The late Skip Waters allowed me to come in and just intern with him. And I would encourage any teacher, anybody who's out there interested in weather, contact your local television station. Hopefully most of them are more than willing to let you come on in and just see how we do things. And either you're really going to like it or you're not going to like it. But I always afford people the opportunity to come in, learn about what we do. They can intern for as long as they want, a couple of times a week. It helps me out, and hopefully it helps them decide what kind of career they want. But getting a hands-on knowledge of what we do is certainly a lot more than you'll ever learn at a university, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, and I agree with that. In particular, every meteorologist I know has had some sort of mentor along the way, and as people evolve with their meteorological careers, keep that in mind too, because at some point you're going to be the mentor and be able to share and pay it forward and help out the next generation of forecasters to come along. The other thing too is, as you know, the physics, the math, the calculus, all that gets very difficult. But if you keep pushing through, you'll prevail. Just don't give up on them. If this is a dream that they have, and just keep pushing, because you'll make it happen. And when you realize you can do that, pretty much anything's limitless for you.
Hear that, high school kids? Physics. It's all physics. Everything. Don't skip that class in high school. I promise you.
No.
Don't take the easy road.
And the one thing I'll add is that after being through an actual tornado, I think it's important to always have a change of underwear at the studio just in case.
And keep your kids.
Throw some in my go bag tonight. Stephen and Ed, real quick, because I think Scott will probably do this too, but I want to make sure we throw in the hit. Can you tell us where to find that link on the Weather Service website to get the Myrtle Beach stuff on your site, Stephen? And then Ed will promote your Facebook and Twitter accounts as well. So Stephen, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, it's if you go to weather.gov/ILM, the very bottom of the web page is a past event link, and then from there you go back to 2001 and you'll see. And the web page kind of looks like what it looked like at the time. You think about the web back in 2001, so don't expect anything fancy, in other words, but you'll get the good satellite pictures. I wish there were radar pictures, but again, with the radar being down, we don't have that on there.
Excellent. Ed, you want to throw in your links and stuff? I know you wrote a blog post recently.
Yeah, we, you can do a search for Myrtle Beach tornado and a link to our WPD.com page where we have the story and some video. But more than anything else, on my Facebook page at Piotrowski WPD, if you just scroll down to July 6th, you can get the blog that I wrote about it, I think 10 years after that, and also a compilation of the videos that we had from the beginning to the end. And you'll basically see the tornado in its entire life, from Restaurant Row all the way down to where it eventually lifted down by Springmate Pier.
Excellent. All right, Scotty?
All right, guys. Well, I was trying to pull up the shows for the coming weeks, but my computer, there we go. I got it pulled up now. First of all, Ed and Stephen, I want to thank both of you guys for coming on tonight. And Stephen, I know you're able to join us back in April, and I appreciate you bearing with our craziness and being another guest with us later on. And we hope to have you back anytime. Hopefully we can get you guys back on, you and Ed both, and talk about some hurricanes maybe towards the end of August or 1st of September, since we reached the peak season of hurricane. Maybe we can have you guys back on and talk a little bit about that. But Stephen, we appreciate it, and like Daniel said, Ed, we appreciate it. We finally got you on. I know we've been trying to work with you and get you on, so we're excited about that, and we'd love to have you back on anytime.
Thank you guys very much. You guys do a fantastic job. I enjoy the YouTube videos when it's all said and done. Thanks.
Well, thank you. We appreciate it very much.
Hey, by the way, Ed, I want to tour your station next time I come to Myrtle Beach.
You come on, man.
I like the red walls back there.
That's it. Come on. We'll be happy to do anything you want.
Thank you, buddy. Appreciate it.
All right, guys, and I'll kind of just finish up. The next 2 weeks we have no particular topics to talk about. I know Ricky's going to be gone next week, so you'll have to deal with Joey, Kit, and Daniel and myself. So we'll find something to talk about, I'm sure. And then the 22nd, we should all be back, and we'll find something. I think we're going to maybe – I know Ricky did a segment on his newscast about lightning, so maybe we can talk a little bit about lightning and the effects of that. We haven't talked about that in a while, so we'll throw that in there. Then at the end of the month, we're going to have Mr. Rick Smith on from the National Weather Service in Norman, Oklahoma. He's going to be talking about before and after the warning. We tried to have Rick on back in April, but as we all know, tornado season in Oklahoma in April is pretty active, so we had to bump that show because he was busy that night. So we're going to have Rick on at the end of the month, and then next month a lot of shows, and we'll post them onto our Facebook page so you can see what's coming up. But again, Stephen and Ed, we appreciate you guys coming on, and we look forward to having you back on as guests some other time.
Thank you, guys, and if anybody's ever in Myrtle Beach, come on by.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
No problem. We'll see you next Wednesday. We wish Ricky a happy vacation. He is much deserved. I think he's had like 3 or 4 flash flood watches throughout this past 7 days. So,
which didn't verify, but that's a different story. Don't get me started on the severe thunderstorm watches either.
He's had his hands full up there.
For the record, that's not Stevens Market. So
no. Totally different Weather Service office.
Exactly.
Sometimes it just doesn't happen.
Yeah,
there's a certain forecaster, the SPC, I'd like to talk to.
And Daniel, I guess we'd be remiss without saying you guys had a little damage in your area this afternoon from some thunderstorms that rolled in.
Yes. Once again, it seems like microburst likes to hit McDowell County, North Carolina. I don't know what the deal is about that this summer. I don't know who's picked off Mother Nature, but that was the case again today. Had some thunderstorms. Really, the only thunderstorms that formed off the mountains about mid-afternoon, and they rolled into western McDowell County off of eastern Buncombe County and had some wind damage in the Old Fort area, and then it slid down along I-40 and produced a little bit more wind damage. And we've had that a lot this summer. We've not had a lot of rain. The drought is getting worse and worse every day across western North Carolina. We're in that moderate drought, and we don't get widespread rain soon. We're probably going to go to severe drought, roughly from, say, I-77 westward to the Blue Ridge. So we've got some severe weather. We've had that. We just need some good rain, what we need around our part of the country right now. We're getting dry.
Unfortunately, I think the only way we're going to change that is a tropical system. Get some a couple of days of rain in here, so we'll have to see. Joey, anything in your neck of the woods you want to talk about before we sign off?
And there is nothing. We're already 20 minutes past 9. You've got a late.
All right, well, we're good. Well, we'll see you guys next Wednesday. Have a great week. Stay cool, and we'll see you next week. Have a good evening.